How about my computer? Okay.
It's doing it.
I started recording this.
Yeah.
Everybody behave themselves.
Oh, there's Carol Ann.
Morning, Lara. How are you? Hi, Carol Ann.
Hi, Carol Ann.
Hi. Nice to see everyone.
Nice to see you. Nice to see Carol Ann. Wow, 9:01. We got 9 people here. Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah. I can go home now.
Oh, Dale, Little John. Cool. Hi, Dale.
Hi, Dale. How are you? Let's see.
Hey there.
At UBC with internet issues should be there shortly. So yeah, Stephen just sent me a text message. UBC with internet issues. Wow, that's kind of interesting. Okay, so we're waiting for Stephen. He's at a huge university with internet problems. Okay, there we go.
Oh, they have internet problems at UBC?
That's what the text message says.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, because you even like doesn't have to be like Zabalos or Puskupi. It can be downtown Vancouver sometimes, right?
Well, I guess maybe it's up on the mountain. Maybe they had a storm or something.
I either blame Trump or the Russians these days.
Well, it depends. People blame everybody these days.
I never get blamed for anything.
Well, I'm
Stephen-
currently available to take blame, and being as I'm not going to be defending myself, so he's the one.
Murray,
It's all
you,
your
shouldn't say-
fault,
you-
Murray.
Murray, you should never say that. That's like a massive open invitation for all of us, is to send all our mean emails to you. You can ghostwrite the
Except for-
replies.
Except we're probably not allowed to, Arjun.
Yeah, that's all right. The general public don't seem to have that problem sending them my way, so I'm kind of immune to all that kind of stuff.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Sheppard is one of several UBC professors, quite a few, who are helping North Cowichan, where I live. We have 15 square kilometers of municipal forest, and we presently have a very progressive council that wants to save it, not log it. And so they're doing some work for us right now, not this minute, but so yeah, I hope he can get on. He's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I think he'll be. Yeah. Let's just start with a bit of context. So I just wanted to, and we'll get everybody to introduce themselves in a second here when Stephen shows. But so essentially, Dale, actually, Little John and I were on a committee with UBCM a couple of years ago on climate action recommendations and policy. And I know Stephen Sheppard a bit before that. I see him in various conferences. And he one of the most, well, there's lots of interesting ones. That I remember the one in Kelowna where he was showing like book around all the map changes and the landscape stuff around how extreme weather can affect various parts of the province, and it's kind of modeling that kind of work. And then lo and behold, he was appointed to our UBCM Climate Action Committee, and really talked a lot about neighborhoods and getting neighborhoods, mobilized to actually do like meaningful emission reductions themselves. And so, a lot of my time is spent on kind of broad, sort of community-wide at the sort of smallest level, policy. And so and one of the things that I've sort of reflected on over time is, we can only go so far as the people who we represent, Stephen, give us permission to kind of do so. And emissions plans historically have never met targets. So, what are some of the, hi, Stephen, just talking about you. And hi, Chris, welcome. And so, here's Stephen, and we essentially, the idea of actually mobilizing folks or engaging on a neighborhood level, going past the concept of just social and community engagement, and having one step past that, actually get people to act, on reducing emissions within the neighborhood. So, finding common cause together, either, with electrification of vehicles, low carbon transportation, biking, walking, sharing things, funding together, different alternative energy things and that sort of stuff. So that's kind of where my mind went. And then there was kind of probably a year gap. And I would talk with Stephen all the time. I'm like, this guy's so interesting. And so then I called him in January. I said, Stephen, I talk about you all the time. I should talk to you, and so we started talking about, trying to get, folks together to talk a bit about this. This is actually, I'm not doing this on behalf of anybody, except for just doing it on behalf of my own sort of interest and my own desire to try and see whether we can, work on a project together. So the sort of very rough agenda today is, I'd like to ask Stephen to sort of introduce himself. First of all, let's all introduce ourselves. And then maybe Stephen can talk a bit about social mobilization with climate. I can talk a bit about the UBCM recommendation that we have that's sort of sitting out there for people to action. And then we can have a bit of just an open conversation and chat. So I have my coffee and oatmeal here. So I'm having my breakfast as we're talking. So it's very casual. And I think that's it for me. So just so everybody knows, I'm Arjun Singh. I'm a city councillor in Kamloops, director of the Thompson-Nicola Regional District. I'm on unceded traditional ancestral Squatman territory here in Kamloops, an area. And I served on the UBCM executive for many years, finished out as past president a couple of years ago and chair the climate committee with UBCM and involved much climate stuff now as well as y'all, as most of you know. So next on my screen is Kate.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I'm Councillor Kate Marsh from the District of North Cowichan. I'm also the regional district, and on their behalf, I sit at the Hulkameetinum Treaty Table, and I chair the Environmental Advisory Committee at North Cowichan. So I'm really excited to get to hear what Dr. Sheppard has to say on neighborhood action.
Thank you. Lucy, could we ask you to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone, and thanks very much for letting me join. I am the alternate for Donna McMahon, who you probably all know, who's our Area E Elphinstone representative. I'm coming to you from the Squamish Nation lands in Gibsons, and I'm just really interested to sit in. She's at a meeting this morning, so she couldn't be here.
Okay, Laura DuPont.
Thanks very much, everyone. Happy to join you good folks today. I am Laura DuPont. I am a city councillor in Port Coquitlam. I am also the president of the Lower Mainland Local Government Association. And much respect for Dr. Sheppard. I believe he has important, very feasible solutions for local governments. I'm happy to always hear from him. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Laura. Murray Weisenberger.
Yeah, Murray Weisenberger from North Saanich in the Wasanic People's Territory, and I'm a councillor, and this is just finishing up my second term. Thanks.
Jessica.
Morning, everyone. Jessica McElroy, City Councillor in the City of North Vancouver on Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam lands. And just as I mentioned when I came in, I do have to drop off early. So previous or sort of preempted apologies for disappearing early on you, but no offense to anyone here. I will just disappear casually when I need to.
No problems. I won't take any offense this time, Jessica, I promise you. Lara, there you go.
Yeah, Lara Beckett. I'm a director with the Regional District of Fraser Fort George, so just west of Prince George and Plately-Tenay territory. And yeah, I'm interested to hear Stephen's presentation. Thanks, Arjun, for setting this up.
Thanks, Sarah. Carol Ann.
Thank you so much. Caroline Leishman, City Councillor in Pell River in the traditional territory of the Tla'amin Nation, who just celebrated their 6th year as a treaty nation, self-governing treaty nation. So that was exciting. I'm also a municipal director on our Cathet Regional District, and I'm the chair of the Climate Change Mitigation Adaptation Committee. So very much looking forward to hearing Stephen speak and happy to be here. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Chris.
Hi, everyone. Chris Pettingill, councillor with the District of Squamish on Squamish unceded territory. Arjun's always seems involved in good stuff. And so when I saw the email and the opportunity and it's about climate, I thought, oh, I gotta check this out. So glad to be here.
We have a special guest and you're back there. Thanks for listening. Yeah, it's awesome. Dale.
Thanks, Arjun. I guess I'm the odd person out here. I'm not an elected official. I'm just Arjun's buddy.
Big buddy.
Dale Aljon, CEO of Community Association. I think most of you know me. I've worked with most of you on one thing or another. And yeah, so like Arjun mentioned, Arjun, Stephen and I were on the UBCM Climate Committee. And that put forward recommendations that were accepted by the membership and the executive and the membership, and will guide UBCM climate engagement with the province for a little while. So thanks to Arjun for starting that up when he was president of UBCM. And yeah, with CA, we've got 26 folks across BC ready to help.
Thanks, Dale. And colleagues, now I just want to turn over to Dr. Stephen Sheppard. Stephen, thanks for the opportunity today. I know that we're hoping maybe we can do this regularly, and this is a great first start. I just have Marilyn Lowe from Saskatoon joining us right now, so I just wanted to sort of say hello to Marilyn before so she comes in. And hi, Marilyn, welcome. Just want to say hello. And
hi there.
Hi there. And so, Stephen, why don't we get started, and over to you, sir. You're on mute, Stephen, just so you know. It's a famous new word, a couple of words.
Yeah, thanks very much, Arjun, for arranging this, and nice to see everybody, some of you I know. And let me start by saying this will certainly be informal, and please call me Stephen in future. And I think what Arjun, we talked about was at least sort of introducing some of the ideas. Many of you have heard or been involved in some sort of action around community engagement on climate, obviously. And I think what Arjun and I were thinking in our recent sort of discussions has been, get a better sense of the interest level in pulling some of the levers that perhaps aren't as commonly pulled in, trying to reach our climate targets, like climate emergency targets, 50% carbon emissions, more or less, by 2030. These are huge targets. We've left it very late in some ways, and yet there's tons of stuff being done by municipalities and others. So it's kind of addressing some of those gaps, or trying to add value to what's already happening by local government, provincial and federal governments on climate action. So, again, I haven't prepared anything formal, but I thought that it might be useful just to quickly review, just take a few minutes to talk about, why we should be thinking about neighborhood level or local level, grassroots type community collaborations, rather than just top-down policy or the normal kind of incentives, all of which are good, regulations, and those are all important. But of course, the regulations can only get regulated if councils feel comfortable voting for them. So talk a little bit about the need, maybe some of the successes where we've seen in other places and in BC, which is something of a leader in this, where we've seen effective grassroots action and seen actual gains in reductions in emissions, things like that. Talk a little bit about what some of the principles behind that very briefly, and some of the barriers and gaps, and then hand over to Arjun, because I think we're very interested in this idea of some sort of competition across the province as a way of sort of galvanizing attention. So maybe I can just sort of run through a few of those things, and happy to, take questions and comments. But I don't want to take too long, Arjun, because I think the discussion is going to be what's most important. It's really nice to have, this many elected officials talking about it at one time. I know many of you have done a lot of work in this area already. So some of the sort of research that we and others have done, and we obviously try and look at it at UBC. By the way, I'm now retired, so I have endless amounts of time to spend on this, but not quite. Still very involved in the research and applications. And so in terms of the need, essentially, if we need citizens, residents, local people to become more, not only informed, but more active on climate action if we're going to meet the municipal targets that many communities have. So to put it, if we go to sort of 30,000 feet and you're looking down at your community and you're looking at all the neighborhoods, right? By 2030, if we've got, I don't know, 50% or a 40% target, that means like 40 or 50% of those people have to usually slash their carbon emissions in 8 years. Right? It's pretty hard to figure out how you can reach those targets if we keep doing business as usual. And it's not like things aren't changing. There's more EVs. There's, people are wising up to climate action. We've seen a lot of change, a lot of things happening. It's a question of how we speed it up and scale it up. And the real, I guess, the argument here is that where people care the most is where they live. And that means not just, I live in Coquitlam or I live in Prince George. I live in a neighborhood, I live on a block, I live near a park, or I live, in the area that I see every day. And what I think the research shows, and some of the work we've been doing and many others, is that many of those folks are concerned. They want to do something. That they have a need to actually want to do something to address this scary climate action. Heat domes have made that very evident to people, but they're not really sure what to do, and they don't see other people doing much. And they may be aware of government and they may be aware of policies, but there's a heck of a lot of policies that most people really don't have the time to sort of figure out, and they don't go to council meetings and things like this very often. So there's a lack of sort of informed awareness about what can we actually do and what can we do together. And the idea is, can we get more people working together? So not just individuals, but sharing information, supporting each other, collective action, basically. There's a need for collective action. And one of the levers we're not pulling is the local neighborhood level. And the idea there is that there are already existing organizations and community hubs that could be leveraged, community centers, faith groups, libraries, schools, right? And many of them are actually doing things, but it's scattered, it's kind of one-offs. It happens for a couple of years and it stops. And we've seen lots of pilots that have been quite successful, and they've all petered out because there's been no framework, no strategy, no overall support. There's lots of boots on the ground. It's like that all the troops are scattered. There's no battle plan. There's nobody collecting the information. Saying, well, that really worked. Why don't we do this over here as well? And so it's this idea of developing a strategy, and that's what we talked a lot about at UBCM, that could be a more coordinated, more joined up, and more accessible to ordinary folks, with even some people with little interest in climate change, but who actually want to be part of a social action, be more neighborly, build resilience against, climate proof against the heat waves or the droughts or the floods. It isn't all about GHGs. It's got to be adaptation and mitigation. And we've got, as I said, 8 years to sort of make some real progress on that stuff. So that's kind of the rationale. I think the examples that and we can certainly talk more about this later, but there have been some really successful examples of, and certainly in Western countries, which are the ones that we're more familiar with. So for example, in the UK, the Low Carbon Communities Initiative, which was a national initiative a few years ago, funded initially by the government, and it developed sort of local trusts and local community actions where they would announce them. It's a bit like the climate emergency, but with a real, top-down, bottom-up thing with a lot of volunteerism to upgrade their sort of climate action at the community level. And they got, the research suggests that they've got something like 15% reduction in GHGs across the board from the communities that did these. And there were hundreds of these communities in the UK that did this. In California, there's the Cool Block program. It claims to have something like 25% emission reductions. That's a very different model, block by block, you know, training people, local champions, a very orchestrated thing that includes both emergency response and climate action. And that's been quite successful in Palo Alto. And I think they're up to 100 or a couple of hundred blocks that have been done in Palo Alto, maybe more by now. Locally in BC, there's been some great examples of things happening. The Green Block process with, I think it was like 7 or 8 neighborhoods in Vancouver, sadly defunct, but it worked pretty well. And they got something like 15% reduction in emissions through carbon footprints for the households that were involved. And that included a lot of people. Arjun, you know, Rick Lochtenberg, he's a keen supporter of the adaptation program with youth in Nelson, and they've, you know, they're out there reducing climate risk with local volunteers and training youngsters and things like that. That's been pretty successful. Could go on and on and on. The Cool Neighbourhoods program in West Van, they got an 85% uptake on home retrofits on Eagle Island. That was the best example. And not totally scalable, but you know, you don't see those numbers in many places. And that was purely social interventions we're talking about, leveraging the incentives, leveraging the grants, leveraging you know, the government policy with local municipal support, but essentially local people organizing themselves to do this stuff. Energy, mostly focused on energy retrofitting, things like that. So there's a bunch of processes that seem to work. There are tools and processes that we and others have been exploring through community centers about how to train local people and get them excited, empower them to do things. And we've seen a lot of interest, a lot of uptake from people who are willing to sign up and take training workshops on how to do both adaptation and mitigation at the local scale. So I think there's interest, there's need. There are some barriers and gaps that we can talk about perhaps later as to why it hasn't already scaled up, why governments are sometimes reticent to do these because they don't necessarily see these good examples, not that well advertised. So lots we can talk more about, but maybe that's enough to sort of get us going, Arjun, and we can see what people think. And I'm sure you guys have lots of good stories that are worth sharing as well.
Yeah, just before we open it up, folks, I just wanted to show the UBCM climate. So we just have our recommendations for the Climate Action Committee that are now UBCM policy. Some of them are really, from the perspective of normal policy, weird. And this is one of the, they were awesome. And this is one of the weird and awesome ones that I think really has, because this isn't really something where, you know, government can just do something. It has to kind of work with all of the groups, but I'll show you, is it here? Yeah, there we go. Okay. So that's the, we call it, everybody can see that screen. You're okay? We can see that?
Yep.
Okay, so that's, we frame things up as signature initiatives, and we have like 5 or 6, or I don't know how many we have. We have a bunch of that recommendation set, but this is sort of what, when Steve was mentioning a competition, this is kind of what we have sort of come up with, you know, in as a recommendation, and really reflecting this idea of, you know, really mobilizing citizens for obviously emissions, but also permissions, you know, for us to be able to do the work, you know, at councils and boards. I'll stop sharing pretty quick here, but essentially, you know, looking at potentially 10 different trial communities, we're looking at, you know, scaling up with neighborhoods and trying to get people excited. This, you know, just given the communities we have on the Zoom today, you know, if we all figured out a way of trying to do that in our local areas, you know, there's close to 10, and obviously, you know, it can go across the country. So we have Marin from Saskatoon here, and so, you know, this essentially again is a way of really getting to the neighborhood level and putting neighborhoods at the center of the conversation. Again, like, sometimes it's can be frustrating, just doing broad policy and not kind of getting down to the neighborhood level. The other thing just to reflect on quickly is that, within, for example, Kamloops or within our region, we have local community groups like transition groups, and we have, 350 groups, and we also have our Rotary clubs are actually quite interested in, like, environmental climate action kind of work. And there's also a bit of a activity at our regional Rotary level around climate. So, trying to create a framework for this. A lot of the pieces seem to be already kind of there in a way, right? So yeah, so open it up for any comments or questions or thoughts. We have lots of time, so who wants to start? Okay, go ahead.
Thanks, Arjun. About 7 years ago, I think it was, we did a household challenge where we had a mentor family and a family who were wanting to make changes, and we expected to make it grow, but like some of the other things you mentioned happened once. But it was so incredible that people reduced, like one woman biked 30 kilometers to work. And we used, that was back in the days when hydro was helping pay for the energy managers, right? So we had to do a lot of hydro reduction. And we actually have in our library a couple of, I don't even know what you call them, but you can hook it up in your house and measure how much energy you're using. Currently, what we've done, Dale knows about our 0.5% dedicated fund from taxes. Every 0.5% of all of our yearly taxes go into a fund on climate. And we've done some window top-up rebates, but that's not in a neighborhood scale, right? And we've recently done $1,000 top-up for heat pump conversion from oil or natural gas. So just as people go into budgets next year, if you're there, that I think that's a really great thing to get, is that dedicated fund so you can help neighborhoods. And how we did it, we went to a statistical survey on 1% actually, and 56% of people said yes. And council decided to go for 0.5% since 44% were not in favor. And so that's just the shorty of it. Thank you.
Awesome.
Marie here. I want to say that in North Saanich, there is zero chance any of this doing any good. But fortunately, I've moved to Sydney, where I think there's a great chance of this having some effect and happening. And that's one of the things I'll be doing in my retirement, is working with my Sydney Council to move this kind of thing forward. So I think this is in the right communities. This has got some real potential to work, just not in communities that are really wealthy and self-impressed with themselves. A little harder there. Thanks.
So Marie, is that so? You mentioned communities that would work and not work in, and you mentioned communities that are wealthy not maybe being as keen. Are there other? Could you give us more detail about that, or do you have any other thoughts about communities that would work or not work in?
Well, just in case of North Saanich, which, as you know, was I think not in this sense, but it's the 9th wealthiest municipality by net worth in Canada. We have a lot of people who don't actually, own big waterfront properties that live here the minimum amount of time. The community's older and really privileged, and without understanding how privileged they are, whereas Sydney has got so much more potential. So, there's two different places, although both are older. But Sydney has more younger people, and I think more future, and a council that is, I think, more willing. So I think there's some potential, definitely potential in Sydney for something like this to happen.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. Go over to Chris.
Yeah, hi Arjun. Thanks for putting this together. It's great. I'm sorry if I missed it. So with the policy that's come out of UBCM, is there support available for these initiatives from UBCM yet, or is the province maybe coming to the table with funding, or is this something like at this point we're kind of doing collectively, sort of on our own as a group? But without,
it's a great question. I don't think we actually contemplated that far down the road in terms of actually implementation steps. So we've recommendations there, and because there was UBCM policy, I mean, we could ask, the association for some seed funds. We could look at the province. We could, look at our local sort of funds. I mean, I don't think something like this potentially, especially initially, is kind of prove it out, has to cost that much money. Obviously, Stephen would have a better idea in terms of the different, programs he's mentioned, kind of what the sort of like financial outlay was and where it kind of came from. So maybe I can ask him to talk a bit about that.
Yeah, sure. I think it's a really good question, Chris. We have been kind of quietly lobbying the province in discussion with people at Climate Action Secretariat, for example. And I know they're actively looking at their strategies, and Arjun, you're on that council too, and I think they're very interested in what engagement strategies there might be. But I think there is still, some reticence and about sort of grassroots type activity and how best to organize it, and also to make sure it aligns with policy, because the concern can be that they might go off and do something and waste their time, and it won't help us cut emissions, etc. But I do think that there's growing interest, and we're seeing more of these training programs. ICLEI just did a sort of a competition between, some of you may have even applied for that, for organizing grassroots programs across Canada, and I think they picked 10 communities across Canada. But that's a very municipal kind of thing, but trying to reach this top-down, bottom-up connection. I can't remember how much money they were offering. I think it was significant, but not huge. Some of the things that we've seen is, so if we, for example, had, I think it was $30,000 to do sort of a 2-year training program through multiple community centers in Vancouver. That came from the Green and City grant. I forget how much the Green Bloc budgets were, but they were probably that same order of range. And I think the key is, how to use money. And there's a number of different ways to do this. And so I know that Toronto's got a new neighborhoods program, and they're using small honoraria for local champions. I think we're talking like $5,000 or less, to sort of motivate things. There are grant programs, obviously, like, block. Maybe you could have dedicated block parties on climate action or something like that might leverage existing neighborhood grant kind of funding. We're now also working, I was interested in your comments, Murray, about North Saanich. We're now working with Oak Bay on a fairly significant program, a 3-year program, which council is funding. And I think that's in the range of $60K to organize, so a quite extensive range of sort of neighborhood level champions to be trained and supported by the municipalities. So there's a real mix, but I think the whole point is to leverage volunteers, and some of it can be done with dedicated staff time, but a lot of this can be done with volunteers if there are good organizations that could be tapped into, which in many communities already have. You mentioned some in Kamloops, Arjun. And it's really more an issue of collecting them up and providing some sort of visible, tangible support, both not just financial, but maybe it's more about staff time or advertising, using communities' resources to advertise and get a media buzz and get sort of the public interest. And I think that's one of the real benefits of a competition like the one UBCM has suggested, because it could really catch the public imagination and be a kind of a fun way, a positive way to look at climate action, rather than, oh my God, doom and gloom, how do we stave off, eco-anxiety? We need some positive things to do. And it might be a key role for councils and municipalities. Sorry, it's a bit of a wandering answer, Chris, to your question, but there are different levels of funding, and it doesn't have to cost millions of dollars now.
There's just a couple of, so Kate, Laura asked in chat about your fund, what your fund in the community in North Cowichan is called climate parcel tax, or like we just put it, like in Kamloops we have 0.35 now on the tax every year, and that's just in general taxation. So they're going to call it climate action levy at one point, but I don't think they actually went down that road. They just kind of basically, we put the budget last week, and it's sort of there now, and it's going to grow to and hopefully it may go faster, but right now it's 0.35, and over time that'll give us $4.2 million of taxation, as that fund kind of adds on every year, kind of a thing, right? So it's 440 to begin with, so maybe it'll take a while, but that's what we're at right now in Kamloops.
That's great. Were you asking me a question, Arjun, or you just mentioned?
Yeah, and that I started making a comment. So
okay.
The question was, what is it? Laura DePaul was asking, what's it called in where you are, the money?
Yeah, I was afraid you were going to say that. I think it's called a dedicated fund.
Okay.
And how one of the ways it's worked, and we're the committee I chair is looking at that and suggesting we change it, is it used to be 80% for corporate issues and 20% for community, but we instated it in 2013, and our corporate we're still not at zero emissions. So the committee's saying, hey, the emissions from corporate are like this much, and in the community they're this much. So we're looking at the terms of reference right now. So if anyone has ideas, I'd love to hear from you. But so we're kind of making a shift. Yeah. But it's called a dedicated. I'll email Arjun what it's actually called, because wording matters if you're going out for permission.
So anybody who hasn't spoken yet, I have some thoughts I want to share, but I'd just like to, anybody who wants to chime in? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so there's a couple of threads I just want to pull on from what Stephen was saying, and one is, this is all about, I think, really importantly about trying to find some alignment. So, with the provincial policies, with Clean BC, for example, a roadmap of 2030, and all of our local climate action, regional climate action plans, I think it does really help to think, in my mind, think about how you guys kind of engage people on projects that help with those plans that are already, kind of well thought out and kind of in place, and sort of momentum is going at various sort of places. So, a lot of times I was up at our university here in Kamloops about a year and a half ago talking to some students about climate or the environment, and the first thing that came up, as it does often, is recycling. And recycling isn't, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it's not your most massive carbon reduction sort of effort, right? It's really transportation or building heat or what have you. So just trying to shift that conversation a bit with them was kind of interesting, because they kept on wanting to go back to, I put my my paper cups in recycling, which is great, it's awesome, but it's not going to get you what you need in terms of the local level for emission reduction. So and we talk about transportation, obviously, with the conversations around parking and space for bike lanes and all that stuff that we get beat up about, is important. So so that's the first thing. I think the second thing is, I think that if we look at the UBCM convention in September as a bit of a signpost, a bit of a milestone in some of this, and you said, well, maybe we could have some sort of session at UBCM, either formal or informal, talking about how we would all, potentially get involved with something like this. And then, I mean, the money that's been sort of talked about so far, like, it doesn't seem it seems like that money is quite attainable. I mean, I'm just saying from my own perspective, and maybe not for everybody's perspective, but like, in Kamloops, like, you could get $10,000 out of council contingency, and kind of like, if people were going to vote for it, to support it and say, well, this is a project we want to kind of do, or, use the money we have for climate action that's kind of dedicated now already. But, you know, maybe service clubs get involved. Maybe there's fundraising on the local transition or the 350 groups in the communities or what have you. So it becomes kind of a cross community kind of a thing. But I think, you know, it would probably be good to know what the other projects have sort of had to sort of fund as sort of core aspects to make it kind of go, and then what could be volunteer, and you know what the sort of mix has been, you know, in the projects that already happened, and kind of build on that, and I think we can find that out, and you know, sort of say, well, here's kind of what it looks like, you know, in terms of, you know, the sort of, you know, the project and the funding and what's volunteer, not volunteer, and then, you know, what would sort of build out the kind of plans, what it would kind of look like, a template, I guess I'd say, maybe is probably a better word, and do it that way. That's just a thought that I have. And then, you know, as we're talking about creating some energy, creating some interest, you know, it's kind of like, you know, if we're at Whistler, UBCM, either, you know, in person or virtually, you know, you could kind of have a bit of a splash around that, you know.
Arjun, is Whistler where it's going to be this September?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes, it's going to be
yeah
there. So
maybe I can just ask you your question, Arjun. Were you thinking that this might be something you know, framed around the UBCM recommendation specifically, and the idea of you know, maybe brainstorming some sort of structure for a broader competition that covers a range of communities, you know, rural, urban, large, small? It would need to be flexible to, you know, what the sort of the local needs are. But that could be a really interesting thing, and it might attract the provincial attention, I suppose. Is that what you were thinking?
yeah, and so because yeah, so I mean, I think there's a couple. So there's obviously UBCM policy already around this. So I mean, that's kind of helpful because it's already, you know, part of the policy of UBCM to sort of have to promote this kind of idea. So we just have to kind of get the UBCM executive and the staff to kind of figure out how they want to activate that. And obviously with the connections we have, we can talk to them. On the provincial side, I think that because I sit on the Climate Solutions Council of the province, so there's conversations we could have around, you know, so I guess before we actually have an event or have something, you know, kind of more public at UBCM convention, we do all the groundwork with the province and with UBCM, with groups to kind of see, you know, where they're sitting with all this stuff. And so you kind of want to get it, the ideal thing with them to all say, yes, we have pockets of money, and then you announce the UBCM, and that's perfect and fantastic and wonderful. You have neighborhood partners already lined up. You know, that would all be really, really good. I'm not sure whether that'll be as perfect as that, but I mean, that was kind of what I was sort of thinking. And so the fact there's UBCM policy, the fact that the province has talked a lot about community engagement around climate, and they kind of talk about the traditional youth, you know, let's talk to youth. I'm like, and I was meeting a couple, I'm like, well, we have to talk to everybody. Youth are actually already on board. We have to talk to the folks who may not be as much on board. And so that was a bit of a conversation last time that we met. If I tell you more, I'm going to have to kill you under confidentiality. But you know, there's a few things there around what engagement looks like, and it being more than just a tick the box with like the youth kind of exercise, in my view, anyways, right? And I think just if we had a you know, a one page of what we wanted to do here and we pitch it to everybody, I think we would find some pretty open ears to kind of that conversation, in my view. So I won't take too much more time. I'm going to ask Marie to go and then Chris to go.
Actually, Chris is first. Go ahead, Chris.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Just as I'm listening, we in Squamish, together with Whistler and the CEA, have a concierge program. I don't know if it's quite started yet, but it's to help connect people to the subsidies and the process to make it really easy for them to get a heat pump. As I'm listening to this, what's maybe missing is that piece where the different neighborhoods are in competition to actually leverage this concierge. So we've got sort of maybe half the equation, but it seems like there's an opportunity, and maybe an opportunity for this to be a real showcase, because LMLGA is also coming up at Whistler to sort of say, hey, look how well this thing works. And then maybe the province is more interested in getting involved more quickly.
So my point is that it'd probably be a good idea to do something at the UBCM, and if we did it in conjunction with the Climate Caucus, which may not be, wouldn't necessarily recommend it as a Climate Caucus event, but just sort of organized together, I think that might work quite well. But I think something should happen like that. Thanks.
Well, I just so Stephen, as you're kind of hearing all these different groups and organizations, we have local government associations. We have 5 regional associations across the province. So Lower Mainland LGA is the next conference to come up. We just had the one in Vancouver Island, Associated Vancouver Island Coastal Communities, and they all kind of happen within about a month's period in the springtime. And then about Climate Caucus, which is what Rick Lautenberg's founder. Murray has been on the board of that, and other folks in case people are involved. And then we have obviously the BC Municipal Climate Leadership Council, which Carolina and I are involved. Carolina's going to be a new chair. I've already made sure she's going to do that. And so that's been around for about a decade. Started off as a mayor's leadership council, and became municipal because there's not many mayors on it right now. A couple. And so there's different groups that have done different things. And on the staff side, there's a bunch of action too at different groups. Jessica McElroy's, quite conversant with a few of those, but Help Cities Lead is one that I'm familiar with, and a few other groups that are working on the staff side to advocate for various things. I'm always of the mind that advocacy can become very messy unless you kind of direct it into various sort of places. So I always prefer to put it towards the UBCM as a kind of a funnel for that, and also on the staff side to the Local Government Management Association. So very quick crash course, Stephen.
Yeah, no, some great ideas. I think it's really about sort of framing and identifying some next steps if there's interest, and that seems like a real logical thing to shoot towards. And I think one of the things I'm hearing is there are again some really good stories out there of things that are already happening, and as you said, Chris, these can be leveraged more. It's not in opposition to what's happening. It's very much to supplement and help promote those things, because most of the people we talk to in the community have never been to a city council meeting ever in their lives, right? And
so disappointing.
So they're not aware. And what we're hearing from other councillors and staff is, can you get these champions who are interested, are showing up, at community centres or faith groups, sometimes things like that, to actually come to council and talk about, we want this stuff, we're willing to go there. These sort of amplifier network like the one Vancouver has, for example. There's other ways to do it though, but so I think there's some circularity here, that these things can reinforce each other and improve the outreach, and also improve the feedback to councils and say, well, there is an appetite, there is a real interest in doing something and doing something positive. So I really like what you're suggesting, Arjun. I think if you think there's enough energy and enough of these good stories that could be aligned, then I think there could be quite a powerful point. We could certainly, if it helps, come up with a clear idea of, how this competition might work, or this idea of, if small amounts of funding were available, matching funds. There's a variety of sources that we've just sort of listed as possibilities. But again, I think the idea is of what's the minimum amount that would have, a bridging organization or someone who could handle something regionally. Is that staff time, or is that money to an NGO or to local matching monies for local organizations that might be willing to organize a competition locally, and involve schools and other institutions. There might also be, businesses. Van City has this, Lighter Living program that not a million miles away from this, and so they've done some really neat things out in Mission and places like that all over the place.
About attaching the spokes to the wheel.
Yeah. So I think if Steve, if you were able to actually think about how it would work and maybe put something together around that, I think that what we had mentioned as an issue with the initial pilots was that there wasn't any stick to itness, there wasn't any sort of scale, or we didn't get to that point. I think this has that's kind of in my mind is how do we get it so that we can scale it, we can make it stick for a long time. So just give you folks an idea. I mean, I spent not very long, about a couple hours putting together 100 emails of folks that I knew across the province and the country on the stuff, and email people, and so wasn't a massive time commitment for me to do that, because the emails are all just sort of in my mailbox, just copy and pasted, and then and then the people who said they would be interested in hearing their the recording or getting notes, there's probably 4 or 5 people like that as well. So we've had 9 or 10 on this particular Zoom, and I do think that there's a lot of opportunity here to try to get this to a point where we have pilots happening, or the competition starts, or however we would frame it up, and I think that if there was a sense of what kind of funding was sort of needed at the minimum, we could shop that around in various places. I mean, and we all have some internal capacity to bring it up at our councils and boards, and maybe some less than others, and that's also an option. But I think that whether it's the province, UBCM, whether it's the CEA, whether it's other groups that have some pots of money that we could maybe work with, I think at minimum you'd have to have a commitment from your council or board to actually shepherd this, and obviously that's commitment of, at the very least, staff time, I would imagine, or council sort of oversight of kind of what's happening there. Although it may be just a community group that's really keen and they don't really need a lot of help from local government staff, but I would imagine that it would be good to have council or board seal of approval at the very least of something like that, right? So and then we could kind of take it to other places. So I mean, we could also put a session proposal into a UBCM convention, have a couple of us with Stephen sort of speak there about that, and then again, as I was saying earlier, I mean, it'd be nice to kind of have a bunch of groundwork done, so the province says, yeah, we got 50 grand to help out with this, and someone else says they got 40 grand or whatever it is, and then communities kind of get involved and get it done. But I think once we get the sort of template, I guess you'd call it, to get it through your council or board would be probably a good step.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I had one thing just to add. You were talking about the network of peoples and contacts, Arjun, and obviously, I think the pitch to the municipalities and local government and councils is the critical piece, but there are these other sort of matching organizations, and one of the things that I do want to make sure everybody understands is some of these ideas and things that we've talked about have been collated and shopped around within a community of practice as well. So it's not just UBC or our group or that's pitching this. We had, and I think Laura, you might even have been involved in a couple of these, but we did these series of workshops that UBC organized, but we had something like 40 or 50 practitioners, hydro, NGOs, consultants, educators. We call them the Now or Never workshops, and I think we did three of them with both applied researchers, but the bigger ones were, we did twice with other engagement experts, engagement specialists, and we kind of came to an agreement. A lot of these ideas and principles that emerged in the UBCM document recommendations really came from those meetings, and so that's quite a network of people who have expertise, and they were very keen that, you know, they agreed completely that there's lots of action out there, lots of people doing things, and none of it is coordinated, and none of it is longer duration, like you said, right? So I don't want you to think it's just, you know, the bee in my bonnet. It's we're reflecting, I think, a lot of practical thinking and applied research findings that seem to resonate with the various sectors that are involved. And I think what you're doing, Arjun, and some of the suggestions with taking it to UBCM convention is just helping spearhead that, because I think a lot of the pieces that are in place, it's simply connecting them together. Maybe it's some funding for sure, but I think it's more than just the funding. I think it's getting this sort of realization that we really have to organize something like this if we're going to make the targets happen and protect our communities, you know.
Yeah, and just before I get to Murray, I definitely have a commitment from me, Stephen, to try to, you know, do whatever I can to make that happen. I think this is critically important for, again, for the emissions and for the permissions. I like that. That was a good little phrase.
Yeah.
And so, Murray, over to you, and then I'm going to ask actually either Lucy, Lara, or Karen to leave us some wise comments because they haven't talked the whole time. So I'm wondering if they're stewing here and wanting to say something. So Murray, go ahead and I'll.
Yeah, so Arjun, I'm definitely going to support you going ahead on this. I'll be attending the FCM, and I think we can talk some of this stuff up as we go. Just Stephen realizes that my situation, like a lot of us, don't have a majority of support on our councils. So getting council support is not something that's an automatic. And unlikely in my case, but we'll see. Thanks.
Okay, before I go to Laura, Caroline, Lara, Lucy, do you want to chime in with anything?
Sure, I'll jump in. You know, I'm on Climate Caucus and you know, a few other initiatives, and Community Energy Association just hosted a meeting with about 70 people to try and develop a climate group across the north. And it was a mix of academic, local government, nonprofits, businesses, a whole, I mean, we're kind of thin on the ground up here. There's people doing a lot of good stuff, but you know, it's the same people. And so I struggle from a regional district perspective often with a lot of these, because I think, okay, I'd love to bring in a carbon tax, you know, some dedicated fund. And I know it's not impossible. It's been done in the Kootenays. And I look around my regional district and I think that's not going to fly. Simply not. Not sure I could even get it through the regional district board to take it out to referendum, you know, and then, you know, I look at trying to bring it down, you know, thinking about in my neighborhood level of things, you know, I've got 5 different community associations in my rural area. And I pitched recently, I said, you know, is there anybody interested here in talking about like a seniors helping seniors bus, a community bus, like a car share? Anything? Nothing, you know, and it's, I don't know, you know, I somebody said earlier about a very wealthy neighborhood, you know, the largest population of my rural area is a very wealthy neighborhood. You know, they're building, the new houses that are going up are 3,500 square feet. There's 2 parents and 1.3 kids. I don't get it. Yeah, and then I get a public hearing where 20 people come out and they say, no, we're not going to allow a secondary dwelling on a 5-acre lot. You know, they'd rather see more sprawl than density. Like I guess I find it very frustrating to figure out at a community level.
Can I just
motivate people?
Yeah, maybe I can just throw in a really quick thought there, Tara. That's really interesting. Recognize the problem. But there's also the whole adaptation side. And we found some success in using adaptation to get people into a climate discussion and not leading with the emissions necessarily, but leading with, what are you going to do to climate proof your homes, and trying to build those synergies and take them on a bit of a journey. I see the struggle. Those are one of those barriers that are real, but there are other ways maybe into the discussion. I don't know if you've seen success with that. And Arjun, I'm going to have to run very short.
Yeah, we pop up, Stephen. We'll just stick around for about 5 minutes, but we really appreciate you being
back
here.
with you if I can't, but I'll stay on for a couple more minutes, but then I do have to run for another.
Yeah, no problems at all. I've got Lucy. Sorry, and then just before I got Lucy, I hear you, and I really want to reflect that this is a reality for a lot of us. But I would hate to lose you on these conversations, because I think that perspective is really important, and trying to help, realistic folks and folks who have, more wealthy, whatever it is, is a key part of the work. So just stick with us, and we'll keep on working on this stuff for sure. Lucy?
I think Laura was before me, Arjun.
Okay. You already played, folks, you guys. She's looking at Laura.
Hey, I just want to say, Arjun, hang on to this list of people. I think there's some energy that's been built here. That is important. So hang on to this list. Let's try and connect everyone at UBCM if we can, and further this conversation. I think I really want to get clarity on the language people are using around whatever this parcel tax or fund, climate fund or whatever is amongst other local governments. I hesitate to use the word carbon tax, of course, because of course that's such a loaded term. But let's talk about this and continue this discussion somewhere else. I think it's important. It feels important. And the point about Climate Caucus, I think, I don't want to lose us, but I think the Climate Caucus is a really good place for us to connect outside of UBCM if there is another opportunity. So thank you very much for today. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Laura. Lucy, go ahead.
Hi, yeah, I just want to thank you, Lara, for giving me the opportunity to pop in. And I felt a little weird as the non-elected person coming forward and saying how challenging it is in our area here to move anything like this, talk about increasing taxes and, that kind of thing. But I just wanted to say that I know that Donna McMahon, who I'm here I'm going to send her some notes. I know she would want to be involved in whatever discussions you have at UBCM, and I'll certainly give her some notes. And but it's challenging in rural areas, I think, to really get people really care about climate, but they don't seem to want to put more money in. And I agree with the comment about housing as well. It's it's really, really hard to persuade people that it's okay, that density is needed, and it's okay, and it can be done in ways that don't ruin neighborhoods. But anyway, I'll stop talking now. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Lucy, so much for coming, representing Donna. Caroline, you unmuted for a second, Caroline. Now I'm going to let you give some wise words to end.
Thanks. Yeah, just really liking what I'm hearing. We've been pretty successful locally with block parties before COVID, and sneaking in sort of emergency management and climate risk information into those block parties. So I think that's a good way to sort of take it out of council's hands and just say, hey, we're going to give some funds to community little neighborhoods to have block parties, and then we slide in all of our climate stuff into that conversation. And we've been lucky that we started years ago putting our the previous CAREP funding, we put it in a separate climate action reserve fund, just dedicated it for probably 6 years. It was just going straight into that separate fund, which was just council's discretion whether a project qualified. They really had no criteria. It was just climate something. So we were able to do a lot of things that way. I think taking it kind of out of the hands of council and giving it to neighborhoods in that kind of way is definitely a good thing, because we never know after October's election who we're going to end up with on our council. So yeah, I'm happy to have this conversation further. It's great. Thanks.
Arjun, what do you think the turnout will be at the Whistler UBCM? don't have much experience about, but it's in Whistler and it's before the election. Is that likely to be a good turnout, you think?
No, it's a lot bad, but traditionally it's smaller than, it's the smallest kind of turnout for the UBCM convention because folks are, in election mode and some folks aren't running again, so they don't end up coming. Other folks who obviously not running and do come. So it's smaller, but not much smaller. It's not like a massive like decrease in my remembrance anyways. There's FCM coming up. So just before, so I want to thank everybody and very, very much for coming. And I think that we can go away, and Steve and I were talking about maybe having this every couple of weeks or every month, something like that, having a call people could kind of come to and attend. And I'm sort of interested, I guess, in, building a bit of a, what's the word? Like a structure, kind of getting like, okay, here's what a template would look like. Here's how we can kind of, action it from various perspectives. I think for the communities that are here today talking about how challenging it is, like this is where we were at Kamloops not so long ago, right? But we just kind of just slow persistence. It took about 10 years, but we finally got, thanks, Stephen, for coming. Very much. Really appreciate it, Stephen.
I gotta run. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Arjun.
Thank you, Stephen. Really appreciate it. We got a climate action plan together, which is quite ambitious. Staff then said they had to figure out how to fund it. And then the funding came through the supplemental budget. Now it's in the budget. At different points of the process, I thought the council would potentially vote against stuff, but we actually had a 7-2 vote to actually get the funds in the budget. So it was pretty decisive. And actually the climate action plan, it was passed on the hottest day in recorded history in Kamloops. I always talk about that. And it was 9-0. So I mean, these things can sometimes serendipitously work out. With all the horrible things that are happening are kind of helpful sometimes. Give people kind of momentum going. So yeah, would that make sense? I just wanted to, and then I can kind of send information out to folks as we go along, schedule another call, and then keep moving. So don't take any more of your time, folks. Thanks very much for coming. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm good for another call, and thanks for doing this.
Yeah,
appreciate
all
it.
right.
Thanks,
Thanks so
Arjun.
much.
Take care. Have a good
Thank
day.
you.
Have a good day.
Bye.